Fiona is here to talk to us about a session entitled Shape Tomorrow's Changemakers in the Primary Classroom. And for those of you who are not familiar with Fiona Beddall, she has been writing ELT materials for 20 years now, although you wouldn't believe it to look at her. Her work includes new high-level primary course Blue Dot, as we have been talking about so far, secondary courses Insight and Oxford Discover Futures, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, and more than 30 graded readers. Several of these have won or been shortlisted for ELTons and Language Learner Literature Awards. Her recent courses incorporate lots of practical ways to develop students' critical thinking and social and emotional skills and encourage them to be independent, confident change makers with a global outlook. She is taught in schools in Britain, in France, in Spain, is currently involved in supporting the language needs of asylum seekers in her local town in Britain. So it is our great honour to welcome to the stage of ELTOC, Fiona Beddall. Give her some love in the chat box. Fiona, have you got your notes open?
I haven't yet got the notes open. No, I'm just trying to work out how to make them.
So next to Show Slide Navigator, just that little icon there.
Show Slide Navigator.
Open presenter notes. There you are.
Fantastic.
And you can see the control from there. Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Perfect.
All right. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Oxford University Press, for letting me come and talk today. And thank you all for coming on a Saturday and listening to all these speakers who have hopefully interesting things to share with you. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is ideas for shaping tomorrow's change makers in primary. So Marinda has already told you a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So let's just crack on. So let's start by thinking about what you want your learners to be able to change. So that we're in a world that has quite a lot of challenges for the next generation. So what are the things that we think they might need to make changes in to improve the world and make the world a better place? If you could share your thoughts in the chat, that would be fantastic. And then we're going to move on and then come back to that chat in a few slides' time. So let's have a quick look at this quote by someone who used to be the United States Secretary of Education. And he says, the key factor for success for any society going forwards is what percentage of its people are change makers. It's the new literacy. So what he's saying there is that to him, change making, the whole skills to become change makers, are as important to the children growing up today as reading and writing. So why do young learners need to be change makers? I think we can all agree the world is changing fast, very rapid change. 65% of the jobs children will hold don't even exist yet. So they need to be able to change themselves to fit into this changing world. They need to be able to update their knowledge and their skills and change to fit this new world. And sometimes it's their attitude that they might need to change. I mean, we have all experienced bad situations that we can't change the situation, but if we change our attitude, maybe the situation doesn't seem quite so bad. And maybe we can even inspire other people to change their attitudes too. And perhaps then things will start to get better. So they need to be able to change themselves. They need to be able to change the organizations they belong to, things like their workplaces, any groups or clubs they belong to keep them competitive and relevant in this fast changing world that they're going to be living in. They may also need to change their societies and help their societies thrive despite all the challenges of the future. So let's now look at what ideas you've got about what are these challenges that they might be facing in the future. So let's have a look. What have you said? Stop war. Yeah, well, war is one of the big things. Tolerance and peace. Open our minds. How to be more confident. Absolutely. Embracing evolution, loving the planet and taking care of it. Absolutely. So the planet, war, tolerance, all these things are going to be absolutely critical for making the world of the future a better place. Fantastic. Thank you. So now we're going to just quickly look at what we're going to include in today's session. So I'm going to start by talking about what I call learner profiles for changemakers. Learner profiles, you could call them character traits, you could call them characteristics, the sort of way of being that children need to be in order to be changemakers. So we're going to talk about some of these characteristics or learner profiles. Then we're going to talk about how to encourage them in your classroom, how to embed them in the students. And then we're going to be talking about ways to take action for change, which is a continuation of what Marinda was talking about just now. So let's crack on. So first of all, these learner profiles for a change maker. And the first one I've chosen is caring. Looking back at that quote from the United States Secretary of Education, this is what he says after the bit I just read out. He says that empathy is the foundation of that new way of being. So empathy is the foundation of change making. Caring and empathy are going to be key, because if we don't care about people who are affected by a problem, why would we want to change anything? So let's start with getting our children to be caring. So how can we encourage a caring attitude in class? One good way is to give them a mix of speech bubbles. You've got some caring language in there and some uncaring language. Uncaring language like only babies cry, or I don't want to hear about your problems, mixed with kinder ways of talking. And you get them to sort these out into the two groups of language, and then you can practice the caring language in role plays and different activities in class. Another good activity is to give them some photos of facial expressions and body language, and again match those with feelings adjectives so that will help them to recognize the way that their classmates are feeling, recognize when people might need someone to show that they care. Another good way of developing empathy and caring is it's called a visible thinking routine. It's the circle of viewpoints. So these visible thinking routines, I don't know if you already are familiar with them, but they're something developed by the Harvard School of Education, and they ways to train students to think. You take one of these thinking routines, you repeat it in several different contexts within class until the learners become really familiar with it. And then they can use that routine of thinking to approach different tasks and different issues. And it can really help them to think more critically. So the first of these visible thinking routines that I'm going to talk about is the circle of viewpoints. So start with an image, a story, an event, an issue suitable for exploring different viewpoints. So for example, let's take a road. A road is going to be built. So whose viewpoints might be relevant here? You might want to look at the viewpoints of the local people who live there. You might want to think about the road builders and their point of view. What about the tourists who want to come and visit the area? You could also think about the animals that live in the area. What do they feel about this new road? So you think about these different people, and you write on a graphic organizer their different feelings about whatever this issue is. You could do it with a story as well. Take an event from a story, and the different characters might have different perspectives, different viewpoints. So you can explore that way as well. And this is a great way of getting children used to the idea that there are multiple perspectives for any given issue, and that we don't all experience things in the same way. And that can help them to start caring, not just about people like themselves, but for other people who are very different in different circumstances, and for other species as well. So next learner profile we're going to talk about is being principles. So here's a nice quote from Jane Goodall, who's an environmental campaigner. She says, what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So to take a really extreme example, think of the worst, most evil person from world history. So that person was a change maker, right? But that is not the kind of change making we want for our children. So because that evil person was not principled. So kids need strong principles and a clear sense of right and wrong so that they can choose the right kind of change making. So how do we develop this in class? It's quite useful to start by exploring the difference between principles and rules. So principles are general, whereas rules are specific. So examples of rules: no running in the school corridor, or you must wear seatbelts in the car. These are rules, they're specific. But behind these specific rules, there's a principle that applies anywhere and everywhere. That we should keep ourselves and other people safe. So that's the general thing, that is the principle. Or another example, your school probably has a no swearing rule. And the principle behind that might be treat everyone with respect. So there are lots of principles. This list on the slide is just a small number, but honesty, being fair, that sort of thing. So these are principles. And how do you teach them? Well, one of the best ways is stories. Traditional stories very often have a strong theme of principles running through them. So, for example, Beauty and the Beast, it's about seeing beneath the surface, not judging people by their appearance. The Lazy Grasshopper, it's about working hard, doing what we're responsible for. Pinocchio, it's about the importance of being honest. And I expect you already may use some traditional stories in your classes with your students that have good principles. So do make some suggestions if you have any of good stories that you can use. Do put them in the chat, the story and what the principle is. And we'll come back to that in a sec. Sometimes a situation might have conflicting principles. So, for example, being honest is something that we want to do. But what do we do if being honest will upset the person involved? So it isn't kind. So these are ethical dilemmas, and they're a great teaching moment. Encourage learners to think, to discuss, to vote on the best course of action, explain their reasons. So let's have a look now whether you've come up with Aesop's fables. The Judgment of Paris, another nice one. So there are a few great stories. The Hare and the Tortoise is another good one. Yes. So lots of these traditional stories have really good, strong principles involved in them. Les Miserables. Lots of strong ethical messages in there. Emperor's New Clothes as well. Thank you, everybody. Lots of lovely ideas there. It's the sort of thing as language teachers we love, isn't it? A good story with a good moral message. So I would encourage you to keep doing those. And then next in our learner profile, we've got curious. And that's key to being a change maker, because we can't care about something, we can't change something that we don't know about. So we need to find out about it before we can even hope to tackle it and solve it. Between the age of 2 and 5, apparently on average, children ask 40,000 questions. And this is fantastic for them. It helps them to make sense of the world, because they're able to target their learning on whatever they find most interesting at that particular moment. And it helps them to build connections with what they already know, which, as we know, is how deep learning and understanding is achieved. But the sad thing is, often as they go through primary school, they stop asking questions, or they ask a lot fewer questions. So we have to think why they do that. Is it that they stop being interested? Is it maybe something to do with our education system? Are we rewarding good questions, but rewarding good answers, but treating good questions as some sort of unwelcome distraction? whatever it is that's causing this issue, it's certainly something that's been around for a long time. Let's look at this quote. This is John Locke, who was a philosopher back in the 17th century. And he says, the great reason why children abandon themselves wholly to silly pursuits and trifle away their time insipidly, that means they waste their time on silly things, is because they find their curiosity balked. That means that blocked, their curiosity blocked, and their inquiries neglected. So if we want learners not to waste time on silly pursuits and make an important contribution to the world and be change makers, we want them to stay curious. We have to avoid blocking their curiosity and neglecting their inquiries. So how can we do that? Firstly, and probably most importantly, praise and reward good questions, not just good answers. This is super, super important. There are also some visible, do you remember just now I was talking about some visible thinking routines? There are some really good ones to develop curiosity. I'm not going to go through them in any detail because I haven't got time, but I do recommend that you click on the link at the end. There's a slide with some links, and find out more about these visible thinking routines that can help to build curiosity. So I see, I think, I wonder is a good one to do with an image. You might look at an image before you start a reading text or a listening, and you can get them to be curious about the image. Or before you start a new topic, you might want to do think, puzzle, explore, or a KWL chart. So check those out in the link at the end. There are also methodologies that can help us to develop and encourage our children's curiosity. Inquiry-based learning is one of them. And I know Oxford University Press has Oxford Discover that follows this methodology. And it has big questions that kick off a topic and encourage and engage students to become more curious. And then hopefully a lot of you have been at Carla Marshall's talk just now about concept-based inquiry. And that also has a big focus on asking questions, and then takes it even a step further, encouraging students to make their own connections between the things that they discover. So that is also a fantastic curiosity builder. Then beyond course books, you can try and give students freedom to ask their own questions to research, perhaps for homework or for projects. And another thing, one of my big passions, graded readers. These are fantastic for letting children follow their own interests and also practice their English. So if you have the budget, I know not all schools do, but if you have the budget for either a physical library of graded readers or to subscribe to Oxford Learners Bookshelf, which gives learners access digitally to their digital devices, you can get to read the Oxford Learners readers. And yeah, so long as they're reading something that's the correct level for them, so it has to be easy for them to understand independently without your help. If they're reading something the right level, they can read about anything they want, just follow their own curiosity. And yeah, this will be fantastic for not blocking their curiosity, but letting it flow. Next up, we've got collaborative. Very important for change makers because they will very often have to work with other people. We can't change the world on our own, so they need to be able to work with others. So I think this graphic here is really interesting to show. I'm sure I'm not alone. And sometimes when you're doing group work, it can be a bit challenging with the dynamics between the different students. And this, I think, explains quite a lot. So if you're doing pair work, you've only got 2 interactions that can go well or go badly. But once you've got 4 students working together, that's 12 different interactions that have the potential to cause trouble. And if you add a 5th person to that group, that's 20 interactions that can go well or can go badly. So if you're struggling to get get groups to work well collaboratively, it's quite a good idea to step back and focus on on pair work and make sure your pair work is working really well. And then you can move on again to group work. So to get pair work working really well, They need to know and practice all the language that they need to collaborate successfully. So things like turn taking, making suggestions, acknowledging ideas, making decisions, all that sort of thing. They need to be able to use that language and be familiar with it. So practice that, perhaps in role plays. And another good way to develop good pair work is to put pairs together to give peer feedback. It's a great way to build collaboration skills, and also it's got the benefit of getting more confident learners to support less confident learners. But it needs to be controlled carefully. You don't want your students to tell each other that it's all rubbish and nothing's right. So train them to start with positive comments. And this format, 2 stars and a wish, is really good for this. You start with 2 good things, 2 things that you like about what the work you're giving feedback on, and then the wish is 1 thing that you wish that they could change or improve. So then when they're working well in pairs, then you can start building up the size of the group. It's more challenging, but it also brings more benefits, right? Because you've got more diversity of experience and knowledge and skills. So there's the potential that a group is going to produce better work because they're pooling their different skills and knowledge. But as we said, it can be challenging. So plan your groups carefully ahead of time. If you've got any worries about the personalities that might be in groups, you want to spread the more difficult personalities between the different groups, and also spread the weaker students so that you've got the stronger students can support the weaker students. If you leave it to chance, you might have quite awkward groups, but if you plan, you will be more successful. So then the weaker students get the benefit of support from the more able students. And another thing that you can do to help your groups to be successful is to allocate group roles. So depending on what the project might be, a project manager, quality checker, equipment manager, that sort of thing. And what I would suggest is sometimes let them choose their own roles perhaps, but it's really good to sometimes allocate these randomly, because it gives more of a perception of fairness. It helps to avoid disagreements. And it also allows students who are perhaps, well, for example, for leadership skills, you tend to have children in the class who have strong leadership skills naturally, and others who are less natural leaders. And if we always let children choose their own roles, then the less natural leaders, the ones who might not put themselves forward for that role, will never get a chance to practice. So the ones who are natural leaders get more practice at it and get better, and the ones that don't have the natural leadership skills don't get to practice, so don't get better. So let's try and spread it out, and random allocation of roles can help with that, to give everyone a chance to get some practice. So who can we collaborate with? Doesn't have to be just people within the class. We can collaborate with other classes, other schools, the wider community, other countries, and we're going to explain some of what we mean by that later on in the talk. So the next learner profile to discuss is resilience, because if we're going to be changing the world, we're going to hit some roadblocks, right? There are going to be setbacks, there are going to be failures, and we have to help our students to be able to accept those without giving up. So we can practice this in the classroom. So first, and probably most important, value effort over achievement. Always praise for the effort that they've put in. And then another really important thing is to help them to reframe negative thinking. So for example, if they're thinking, I can't do it, see if you can just add that yet. So I can't do it yet, with the possibility that, or the probability that they will be able to do it in the future if they keep trying. Or I failed, get them to think about what they've learned from their failure. So they can learn, and then they can get closer to succeeding next time. Or if they're saying it didn't work, well, no, that's good, it didn't work. So you've worked out one way that doesn't work. So what are the other ways we can try? A different way might work. So let's keep trying. The learning pit. This is really, I think this is a fantastic visual metaphor for what happens when we learn something difficult. It's an idea that was developed by James Nottingham. So yeah, if you start on the left, you've got, I think I can do this, and you start confidently, and then things don't go to plan. You realize it's harder than you thought, and you go, you're in the learning pit, and you're stuck. You're probably feeling that you're even worse at it, whatever it is you're trying to learn, worse at it than when you started. And you think you might never get any better. But then if you keep trying, you focus, you work hard, you try different strategies, slowly but surely you climb out of the pit. And then when you're out of the pit, you realize that your understanding is much higher than when you started. You can see the person on the right is higher up than the person on the left. And then there's great news too, that the more you struggle to learn something, the longer you will remember it. So by having been in that pit, you're actually benefiting your learning. And also you'll have tasted the success of getting out of that pit once, so you'll have the resilience to try and do the same again. So if we throw difficult challenges at the students, we do want children to be able to succeed, and so we do want to give them manageable things, but there is no harm in giving them difficult things that will throw them into this learning pit, because it will help to build resilience. And then the last of the profiles that I want to talk to you about today is active. So I don't mean active in the sense of doing lots of exercise. We're not talking about sporty here. We're talking about the opposite of passive. So we want our children who are going to be change makers, if they see a problem, we don't want them to just sit and watch. We want them to do something about it. We want them to be proactive. So how can we do this? We can encourage them to find their own solutions to problems in class. So, for example, go and find a dictionary, or ask a friend, or find out online, or practice something again and again until you can do it. So ways of self-help rather than always looking to the teacher. Another good method is to encourage the students, give them a chance to be the teacher rather than the more passive role of learner. So you could ask groups to present a revision of something that you've already learned in class. Or you could give different groups different aspects of a topic to research, and then they can present their findings to the class. You can also give them meaningful choices. For example, they could choose how to present their work. Do they want to draw a picture, write something? Do they want to record a voice note, make a video? Let them choose how they present what they've done. Or just the order in which you do activities in class. Do they want to learn the song before or after they do the grammar, which helps them to learn more effectively? Let them think about that and make the choice. Or you can give them their own choice of topics to research instead of one that you've set. And then one last idea here, a suggestions box in your classroom. So it's a great way to help them see that their ideas, if they spot something, if they see something that they think could be improved, they can make a suggestion. But I would just warn you, don't set it up unless you're going to follow it through, and check your box regularly, follow up on the suggestions, because kids are very good at detecting the insincerity. So if you encourage them to make suggestions and then you ignore it, that's probably worse than not encouraging them in the first place. But if it does work, you're empowering them to identify what change would be useful and have it acted on. So quick revision of these 6 learner profiles that we need if we're going to have change makers in our class. So caring, principled, curious, collaborative, resilient, and active. Now, you might think that there are more. You would be perfectly correct in saying that I've missed out some important characteristics, but I would argue that 6 is enough to focus on in class. If you get many more than that, it will be very difficult to keep them all in your head and in the students' heads. So I would recommend that you start with those 6, and then you can perhaps expand to some more important ones later on if you want to. So how do we embed these learner profiles in the classroom? How do we teach them, practice them, encourage students to think about them? Some of the ideas that I'm going to be including here come from Blue Dot, which I think you have already heard about from Mirinda just before I was talking. But yeah, Blue Dot is actually, this is a really exciting day for me because I've been working on Blue Dot for I think 4 years now, and these things take a long time, and you're sworn to secrecy. You can't tell people about them while they're in development. So today it's the first time I'm actually allowed to talk about it, and I couldn't be prouder of this course. I'm really excited about it. It's innovative in lots of different ways, as Mirinda has already explained, but one of the ways is the way that it develops change makers. So it's called Blue Dot. It's got concept-based inquiry, so it delivers a lot of the benefits that Carla Marshall was talking about. And also, as Mirinda was saying, it's got an exciting new approach to projects. And it also is good for developing active global citizens and change makers and embedding the learner profiles, the characteristics that a change maker needs. So first of all, we have to introduce and teach the profiles, and we can do this through stories, through songs or poems. We can give the students multiple choice quizzes to see how resilient or curious or whatever they are currently. So, and then we can also give them worksheets that encourage them to reflect on these characteristics, how they use them at the moment in their own life. How do the profiles help them? How would they help? How would showing that profile help them to help other people? How could they use that profile more? So all these things are good ways to introduce the profiles. We provide a pack of support material in Blue Dot, but you can also find useful material in the PYP learner profiles. The PYP is the Primary Years Programme of the International Baccalaureate. And you can search for, if you search a particular adjective like resilient or curious, and then PYP, you'll find lots of useful materials there. So when you've taught the profiles individually, it's important to make students understand that they're like tools in a toolbox. They are ways that you can solve everyday problems or situations. Sometimes you'll use just one. Sometimes you might need to use a mixture to tackle the problems and sort them out. You just need to consider which profile or combination of profiles is most appropriate for a particular situation. So you could have a poster on a wall with the profiles on them, and then when a situation comes up in your class, you can refer students to the poster, say which of these profiles would be useful in this situation. Or for younger learners, you could even have a toolbox with a little tool to represent the different learner profiles and take it out of the box when you want to use it. And then another thing that we can do in class is play different games that practice our use of the profiles. So you can have board games or card games or dice games with situations where you can apply the different profiles, and often the situations you can apply multiple profiles to a particular situation. But these all help to embed and reinforce the importance of the learner profiles in children's learning and also in their everyday lives. Another fun way to practice the learner profiles is if you put secret missions on cards. So write some things on cards, cut them up, get each child to take a card, and it's their secret mission for the week. So they might get, I don't know, a curiosity mission, which is to ask 5 why questions every day. Or it might be a caring mission to help another student in recess every day. So this is their mission for the week, or you could make it longer, and check in on it, remind them through the week that this is what their mission is. And then at the end of the week, get them to reflect on how their mission went. Was it successful? Did they remember? And what they learned from it. And then another way to embed these learner profiles is through the reading text, listening texts, all these texts that you're studying in class, as well as normal comprehension questions. You can give them questions that relate to the learner profiles. So I'll just let you read those. I'm going to have a sip of water and let you just read those through. Okay, hopefully that's given you enough time to read through those. So yeah, any text that we're learning, we're using in class is likely to have opportunities where we can bring in one or more of these learner profiles. So we also should encourage students to notice these learner profiles as other people use them. So there may be characters in stories that are particularly caring or curious or principled. They may come across people in the news or people in history. And it's great if you can collect these. You could ask the students to make cards. You could have worksheets or folders where you collect information about these role models who show a particular characteristic and what they did that demonstrates that characteristic. Or you could have a board in your classroom that displays certain role models and explains why they are role models in the use of their caringness or their curiosity or whatever. And as well as noticing other people outside the class showing these learner profiles, also notice people in the class. So you could give stickers or points to people who have shown curiosity or resilience or whatever the profile is. You can do that with analog, old school, real stickers or software like Class Dojo. You can set it up so you can award resilience points and curiosity points. And doing the point system is quite useful also because it helps you can check in and see whether you as a teacher have been giving enough focus to all of the learner profiles, because sometimes we sort of are particularly focusing on one and then we forget that the other ones are important too. So we can see that we're getting a balance, and also we can see if any students are struggling to develop their learner profiles in a particular area. So we can check in on individual students' points and see if they need a bit of a boost, a bit of encouragement to develop in a particular area. And then for particular high achievements, you can give a certificate. So learner profile certificate for groups or individuals or even the whole class, and write why you're proud of them and what it is that they did that makes them deserving of their certificate. So that is the section finished on the learner profiles. And the next thing I'm going to be talking about is these the ways that we can take action for change, which I think in a lot of ways is the most important part of developing change makers in the class, because is giving them actually the opportunity to be change makers. Sounds obvious, but how do we actually do this? So first of all, I'd like you to do a poll. Is the poll working? I hope so. Charlotte, is there? Ah, here we go. Marvellous. Thank you, Charlotte. So yes, if you could do the poll, that would be great. So who is the audience of your project? So by audience, I mean, who is going to interact with them? Is it going to be just you? Is it going to be classmates, students at the school, or a wider audience? So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to see whether this is done. Charlotte, does it just pop up when it's...
I will close it for you when you're ready. So just give me a nod and I'll take it off.
Okay.
But you should be able to see the results on your screen.
I can only see 0% at the moment.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, we're currently at 45% for classmates.
Right.
With other students at the school coming in second with 22%. I'm not sure why you can't see that though.
If you click on polls, Fiona, if you look at the chat box and click on polls on the right.
Okay.
You should be able to see it all there if you can't see it on the screen. But yeah, it should be on your screen.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like most people are sharing their projects with people within the class and outside the class, but within the school community. So yeah, we'll be doing some of that, but we're going to be encouraging you to also go a little bit wider into the wider community, and even sometimes internationally, to share your projects. So now I've lost that. What am I doing? There we go. Sorry, everybody. I'll be back in a sec. Right. So yeah, we're going to move on from the polls. So yes, let's talk about what we mean by taking action for change. Firstly, it's making an impact for the better. But also we want them to be applying the learning that they've done recently in class to a real life task. We want it to follow on naturally from what they've been learning. Ideally, it's student-led. This is important. We don't want to over-manage their actions. We want them to be making their own decisions so that they have a greater sense of purpose. And this is then a better rehearsal for being change makers in the real world. In the real world, you're not really a change maker if you just have someone say, do this, do that, and you do it. So we want them to be able to make their own decisions as much as possible. Group or whole class, it depends on the project. So I would say always start with whole class projects while you get them familiar with the process of a taking action project. And then when they've done a few together, you might want to let them do different projects within their different groups, but it does depend on the type of project that you do. As we'll see later, some of them are quite complex and others are much more easy to separate off into different groups. So I think both are fine. So this is an example from Blue Dot. So if the main takeaway is that we're wanting students to choose their own project, they might struggle to do this just without any support and help. So what we think works really well is to provide some ideas for inspiration. So some example of projects that other classes, other students in other schools have done. And these can then be a springboard to their own ideas. So first of all, recap the learning that you've just done so that it's all fresh in their minds. Then give them some projects that other people have done as inspiration. So either from Blue Dot, if you're going to be using that, or you can also find ideas of projects online. And I've put some links in the back at the end in the final slide of places that you might be able to find some good projects, or you can find them yourself if you search for primary school project and then the topic that it is that you're wanting to do your project on. So you've reviewed the learning, you've got inspiration, then you need to get your students to identify a goal, something related to the topic that's been studied, that they can use the type of change that they want to achieve. So you may well be familiar with the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These are a really good starting point. Things like quality education, good health, clean water. These are a great starting point. But for the purposes of a Take Action project, I'd recommend you go narrower than that. So rather than good education, you might want to focus on children being happy in the playground, or how to enjoy music in your educational experience. And again, resist the temptation to tell your students what the goal is going to be. Even the youngest primary school children will usually have a clear idea of what's important to them. So try to go with their feelings of what's important and what needs to change. What are the issues that they want to be change makers for? They'll work harder to achieve it if they've chosen it themselves. So discuss their ideas. You can start in pairs, then groups, then whole class. Get them to record all the ideas that they like, and then choose their favorite. So once they've chosen their goal, they need to start getting their ideas together of the type of action that they could take to achieve their goal. So we've got some examples on this slide. Some of them are school-based, so things like presentations to other classes, or setting up a new school club, or a quiet corner in the class, or a library in the corner of the class. Then others are more community-based or even international, reaching out to schools in other countries. And they can be all sorts of different media, blog posts, podcasts, making a leaflet or a poster, organising an event or a contest. Some of them are going to be much more time-consuming than others, and some of them won't be practical in your settings. But that's okay. I think what's really important is to let children run with their ideas, because some of the things that you might not be able to do in class, they might even decide that they want to do outside class to be change makers. So encourage thinking big. Don't rein them in until you have to. So encourage the big ideas, and it might surprise you what they manage to achieve. So brainstorm the ideas, and then even if you don't do an actual project, even if you don't have time for projects, I would recommend you do the brainstorming phase, because it's great training for being change makers outside the classroom. But if possible, we would like you to do an actual project with your class. So if you're going to have time to do that, choose a realistic action and an audience. So realistic, give them let them know how many lessons or how much time you've got to achieve their project. And the audience is important, because sometimes the audience might be themselves. They might want to change themselves, but sometimes it'll be other people's behavior that they want to change. So to make the project really successful and effective, they need to start with an audience in mind. They need to be clear on who they're trying to change and how they're going to do this. So then when they've chosen their action and their audience, they plan. Now, depending on the type of project they want to do, the type of action and the level of the students, you might well need to support this with some scaffolding. So in Blue Dot, we've provided some fantastic planning worksheets for different types of project that they might want to do. Things like websites or presentations, or, I don't know, podcasts, or events that they want to organise. So, but we can't predict everything that they might think of wanting to do. So you may need to get them to choose something in one class, and then you go away and knock up a little planning worksheet for them. And then for the next lesson, you can give them the planning worksheet and you can get started on the planning. So typically our planning worksheet would have perhaps some useful language, perhaps some tips, and then some space for them to make some notes.
That's 10 minutes, Fiona.
Okay, thank you. Then once they've planned it thoroughly, you let them get on with it. So you support, but you try to let them be the leaders of their own project, whatever it is. And then there's a final really important stage at the end of this whole process. After they've done their taking action project, you need to give them time to consider and reflect. How successful was it? Did it achieve the goal that they hoped it would? How do they know if it achieved the goal? What did they learn from doing the project? What could they do better next time? What skills might they need to develop to be even better change makers in the future? So that's the process. We're now just going to look at a few examples from Blue Dot of specific projects that we've included for inspiration, but the types of things that you could get your students to do. So this was done by a school in Turkey that they were learning about making good choices and forming good habits. So for their project, they each chose a new positive habit. Then they made a habit tracker to help them keep on track for a whole month. They tried to embed this new habit for themselves. And then at the end of the month, they did a presentation about the project in a school assembly. And they also shared their habit tracker on the school website. So they, So yes, their goal was to support new positive habits. Their audience was themselves and people at their school. And their action was to make a habit tracker, develop a new habit, give a presentation, and share their tracker on the website. They had a planner to support their planning. And sorry, let's just go back to that one. And so they got lots of language practice out of it because they gave a presentation and they also wrote instructions for the habit tracker for the website. So there was plenty of language practice and they achieved real change in themselves and in other people. So this next example is from Vietnam and a school there. I don't know if the slide is big enough for you to read, but the boy at the top, he said, so they were learning about well-being in class. And this is the end project after a unit on well-being. And the boy says, we wanted to find and share new ideas to help everyone's well-being. And then further down it says, we made a questionnaire. We asked students what they do to help their well-being. Students in Thailand and Indonesia answered. Then we got together online and talked about our answers. So they've got the goal of improving well-being, the audience, people in Indonesia and Thailand, and also themselves, because they were learning from the other people in the other countries. And their action was to write a questionnaire and do a digital exchange, so an exchange of information online. And again, there were planners to help support their planning stages. And the project gave them lots of language practice. They were writing a survey in English. They were reading the answers of the survey. And they were also having a meaningful conversation in English to communicate their ideas and exchange with other people. And then this last project, last example, this was one done in France after a topic about learning new skills. So the goal was to help people to move and be healthy. Their audience was older people in their community, and the action was to learn a dance, teach it to older people, and learn a skill from them too. So, so they're improving the health and well-being of their community. So this is a bigger one to organise, obviously, getting older people into the school. And one thing that, so you can give them a planner to help them with that, but sometimes it can be a bit difficult to get your head around where the English language comes in when you're dealing with the local community. But what I would say is it's a language class, so we can still use English language or whichever language you're teaching to do the planning. You can write bilingual invitations to the event. The dance that they made, they could have had English instructions for the dance. And then after the event, they could have had bilingual thank you letters to the people who came to the event. They could write a report in English or whatever your target language is in, about writing a report about the day for a school newsletter. So there are lots of options of bringing English or whatever language into the lesson, into the project. So now it's your turn. Can you think of a topic that you've been learning with your students recently, and share ideas for projects that for taking action? So if you can think of anything, please put them in the chat now. And I'm just going to get the chat. Good. So yeah, so we're looking for something that's a continuation of what they've been learning, something that has an impactful change, either for themselves or people in their school community or the wider community. Yeah, traffic and car pollution. That's a really good topic. Deforestation. Yeah, animals, gender, feelings, social values. Yeah, recycling. Yeah, so there are so many topics where there is that they can study and then they can lead on to useful projects. So I'm just realizing, I'm afraid I've been very talking too long and I've run out of time for many questions and answers, but I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions and answers.
So what I'll do for you, Fiona, there's been quite a few sort of common questions coming through, so I've tried to take a note of those.
Fantastic, thank you.
One that several people have asked is whether giving students responsibility has an impact on their engagement in the classroom.
Well, I would say definitely it does. Yeah, if you've got I mean, if you're going to do something like, for example, if you have to organize events and you're told you have to organize an event about something that you're not particularly bothered about, or you get to choose what the event is about, surely you're going to be more motivated if it's something that you're interested in. So yeah, in my experience, the engagement is much, much greater if you can give them the choice of what the action is going to be, and what the goal is going to be, because we want students, the realistic thing for the change makers of the future, they are going to be trying to make change about the things that they care about, right? So we need to encourage them to recognize what it is that they care about, what they care about enough to do something. So yeah, I think the engagement will be greater if you give them choice.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think, that's been a really informative session.